Hello everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, 5G Phase 2, What's Next After eMBB and FWA, sponsored by ECI, now part of Ribbon. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. On the left-hand side of your screen is the Q&A. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can type your question into the Q&A box and submit your questions to our speakers. All questions will be saved, so if we don't get to answer you, we may follow up via email. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the yellow Help widget. Here you can find answers to common questions. A copy of today's slide deck is available for download in the green Resource List widget. Towards the end of today's presentation, we'll ask you for your feedback. A survey will pop open on your screen and will only take 1 minute to complete. Your feedback is extremely helpful. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available about 1 day after the event and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier today. I would now like to turn the event over to our moderator, Heavy Reading's Principal Analyst, Gabriel Brown.
Thank you, and hello again everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. 5G Phase 2, What's Next After Enhanced Mobile Broadband, the eMBB on the slide, and Fixed Wireless Access, FWA. It's great to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us. It's over a year now since the first 5G networks launched. The technology is rolling out pretty much all the major regions around the world. In some markets it's been going at great pace, in others a little more tentative, and in some markets are still kind of held up by spectrum availability, even though there's quite clearly some demand. I think if we look at the picture overall, our progress has been very good. And what we're all looking at now is how these networks perform, what the customer experience is like, and very importantly, I think, is what comes next. For me, that is how can operators extend coverage dramatically, and then what can the industry do as a whole to generate extra revenue off these platforms. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the session today, really a kind of a near-term view of what's next for 5G. So, as you heard, my name is Gabriel Brown. I'm a Principal Analyst with Heavy Reading. I'm also your host and moderator for today. I'm joined by 3 expert guest speakers. So, first of all, I'd like to introduce Haim Porat, who's CTO of the Packet Optical Business Unit at Ribbon. Welcome, Haim.
Hello, Gabe. Thank you for hosting me. So, as Gabe said, I'm the CTO of the Packet Optical Division of Ribbon, formerly known as ECI. We are heavily invested in 5G, and I'm leading the research in transport-related 5G applications.
Fantastic, and I've known Haim a while. He's very clued in, so it's great to have you, Haim. Do remember we can have questions as we go through this, so you can fire some questions in at him as well. He's technically very capable, of course, as a CTO. I'd then like to introduce David Stokes from Ribbon. Welcome, David.
Hello, thanks, Gabe. I'm responsible for marketing within Ribbon, Ribbon ECI, and my main areas of responsibility are, of course, mobile backhaul, which is why I'm on today, but also our packet solutions, and which is really interesting within the 5G environment, are mission critical solutions, and you'll see more as that comes together later.
Okay, good stuff. And then Paolo Pescatore from PP Foresight. Welcome, Paolo.
Thank you very much, Gabe. Excited to be on this session today. I look at the connected consumer in this converged landscape. I've been covering the TMT sector for over 20 years now. Back to you.
Okay, good stuff. So in terms of agenda, I'm going to start. I have just one slide of introduction. We're then going to go to Haim, then to Paolo, and then to David before some Q&A. You can submit questions at any time, and keep an eye on that as we go through. Maybe firing 1 or 2 questions as appropriate during the session as well. So in terms of the introduction, as I mentioned, progress has been pretty good. In most areas, we've made significant progress over the past year. So at the end of the second quarter this year, there are 81 live networks. The chart here says 71. That was of April. And clearly we're going to see more and more operators over the next few years launching. I think by my count now we're on the 3rd generation of 5G device silicon. and of course, third generation of devices on the market. We have new flagships coming in autumn and toward the end of the year, so that's very interesting. We've started to see some innovation in the consumer offer for 5G. I think here there's quite a bit more to do, but we haven't really seen a revolution, but things are moving. So the kind of things we're seeing are bundling of content, more uptake of unlimited plans, larger buckets, service-based plans, and so forth that people talk about. More and more operators offering fixed wireless and so forth. A particular mention here to cloud gaming. I think that's probably the kind of one of the key innovations that people have been, I would say, probably really trialing. I know it's commercially offered, but just first testing that as a service, getting a sense of what 5G can do. And obviously, we're going to hear from Paolo in a moment about gaming. So the other thing is to mention there's really a lot of kind of ongoing effort to build and extend 5G capabilities, and there's a lot more to come in that regard through 2020. We've seen low band and dynamic spectrum sharing already deployed in several markets now, and as we go through to the second half of this year, we'll see things like 5G carrier aggregation, dual carrier this year, 3 carrier early next year. That's very important, helps with coverage, capacity, spectral efficiency, and a whole bunch of things. We're going to see 5G core and standalone. A few operators are already live in sort of trials and pilots, could see that commercialized. Standalone and 5G core, that's what will enable some of the more advanced services that we talk about in related to 5G. So perhaps fixed mobile convergence, potentially some of the network slicing applications, 5G private networks, and so forth. I mentioned that we'll see some flagship and mid-tier devices, new ones coming this year. I think that's really important from a consumer perspective. I don't personally view 5G as being that interesting at the low end. These boost the numbers on analyst forecasts and so forth, but I think you need a kind of a reasonable quality of device to actually notice, the difference with 5G. So I think we need to look at kind of the capabilities there and match that to the network. Just pushing in big numbers with low-end plans and low-end devices is great for the numbers, but it doesn't make that much impact on the end user. And then just before I hand over now, I wanted to make the point that we have seen and going to continue to see quite consistent progress in terms of capabilities, performance, and efficiency. Release 16 is pretty much done now. We've got about a year to 18 months for that to get into products and into networks. Release 17 work is underway. So I'd put it, if we talk about a race, I don't always like the analogy, but if we are, we're probably in like the first lap. We've done the first lap of a 10-lap race. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Haim. There's just a quick look at the agenda we have here, and then hand over to Haim at Ribbon ECI to take you through the next part. Haim.
Thank you, Gabe. So if we look at 5G, it's hyped with great expectation for big revenues from new applications. So while carriers are investing a lot in 5G, few, if any, are making money out of it. And the basic notion is that you need some kind of yet unseen killer applications that people are hoping that will be imagined in the future in order to make money out of 5G. But is it really the case? Do you really need all of these future-looking applications in order to make money? What we say is it's not necessarily so. We think that there are already low-hanging fruits that carrier can implement today using existing technologies, existing business cases, and existing programs in order to make money out of the 5G networks. And I will cover 3 different domains, the first being dynamic assured services, the other API economy, and last but not least, low latency cloud gaming. Let's start with the dynamic assured services. If we look at who is making most of the money with connected services in the connected world, these are the web scale companies, not the telco companies who are providing the infrastructure for that. Because the web scale companies unlocked the potential of the net by providing self-services, dynamic services, and allowing the customers to pay for what they need when they need it. They have also gone, like Amazon and Microsoft, up to the customer premises and also offered customers assured services. And this is a very strong point that they have over the telcos. Now, 5G can change that, because 5G is a network that has all of the capabilities to provide dynamic assured services on the fly and as you need them. And this stems from the inherent qualities of 5G. First, 5G has all of the infrastructure for dynamic service provisioning for customers that disappear and pop up in different places, and they have different types of plans, and they need different requirements for each service. So there is a lot of infrastructure in mobile networks like the IMS to provide differentiated services to different customers. Moreover, 5G has different service profiles which didn't exist in any type of network before, being fixed or mobile, to provide different type of services with different types of assurance. So having all of that, carriers can now unlock the huge potentials of dynamic assured services with 5G by adding to the basic functionalities of 5G, automation of the OSS/BSS, adding dynamic pricing to the networks and their services, preferably using AI, like it's done in the API economy, and of course, upgrading the antiquated transport. The second use case that we are seeing is the case for telecom APIs and the case for API economy in general. Let's take, for example, autonomous vehicles. So autonomous vehicles is an evolving field with a lot of potential. Some of it will not happen in the next few years, but definitely things like guided driving and semi-automatic driving will happen. Now, if we look at it from my point of view, the chances of telco providers providing the software and applications for running cars is very low. Basically, that would be the domain of the car manufacturers. But telcos can provide APIs that can help the car manufacturers have better control over the cars, being semi-automatic driving or full autonomous driving. Things like exact location, traffic statistics, common destinations, even common destinations between cars of different manufacturers, reporting traffic events on the fly, and even things like weather conditions, because surprisingly enough, the radio of 5G acts like a very good weather radar. So with all of that, carriers can now provide to the application providers things that will help them improve their applications without trying to own the autonomous cars applications. Another similar domain is the API for drone controls. So drones today have no type of centralized control like in standard aviation. It's basically an operator by operator. They are uncoordinated for low range, and this is something that needs to be improved. Again, 5G and mobile networks can come to the rescue by providing exact statistics, exact location, the information about nearby drones coming from different operators, and again, providing weather condition. Now, this can create an infrastructure that can provide something like a centralized virtual air traffic control for small things like drone. Again, without owning the application, just by providing APIs to the other systems and other system operators to manage their applications. So what we envision is basically the carriers installing the multi-access edge compute, know the application themselves, by providing their APIs that can enable other providers to put applications on them and be able to put the applications on different mix of different carriers and still have continuity over the services. The next application that I'm going to discuss is part of our main theme of the day, is online and cloud gaming. So online gaming is already here, and online gaming is all about players having console in their house, but they are playing with people all over the world in other places. And this is done by having game servers in the network that get the status of each player, coordinate the statuses, and then sending updated status to each gamer. Of course, this is very latency sensitive because you don't want to wait or jump or have any difficulties in your game. So online gaming is very latency sensitive, and it requires a different network, but it doesn't require too much bandwidth. Cloud gaming, on the other hand, completely changes the game. In cloud gaming, what we have is that the game itself is rendered at the cloud and not at the customer premises. The customer premises, what we have is just a simple device, can be any internet-connected device with a screen, and this screen only sends simple control messages to the game server, and the game server renders the game for everyone. But the flip side is that now the game server needs to send high bandwidth, high quality video with very low latency to the user in order for it to experience high quality games. So this is a game changer. And currently, with existing networks, this really doesn't kick off because the latency of today is not guaranteed and the bandwidth is not guaranteed. So we have pipes with huge bandwidth, but since they are not controlled and there is no way to guarantee the usage of these pipes, it's not guaranteed that you will have the game operational with low latency and high bandwidth throughout the game. And this is something that can inhibit services like Stadia from taking off. Because if gamers are going to pay for a game, they want to know that they are getting guarantees on latency and bandwidth if they are willing to count on the cloud provider to provide them the game. And here is a good example where cooperation with the carriers can lead to a significant better results. So let's look at the problem. If you are a game provider, you want to put all of your game servers at a central location, because this would be the most economical way to use your network. You have one big data center, you enjoy the economics of scale, and then you also enjoy the possibility to pool resources. But the problem is, of course, that if you are far away from your users, you are getting a lot of latency and you cannot guarantee the bandwidth. Now, the flip side is that you can put the game servers everywhere in the network, but that would lead to a very high expenses due to the delivery of expensive game servers everywhere in the network. With hard slicing in the transport coinciding in the 5G network, you can now have the possibility to trade latency with distance. So you can pool your resources at different locations in the network and compensate for the latency that you could have gotten by commissioning low latency hard slice to the different locations. And with that, you can optimize where you put your servers, how you can play, and how you can play with your budget. So it's a very strong tool for cloud operators to choose how to manage the latency budget and the bandwidth budget. So in summary, we have shown that carriers can benefit from 5G today using existing technologies and existing methodologies for making revenues using either APIs or dynamic services, and they need to upgrade the transport and their infrastructure to be completely agile end-to-end. And gaming specifically is one of the applications, rising applications, that can provide such an opportunity by telcos cooperating with game providers. And our next presenter, Paolo, was commissioned by ECI Ribbon to do a survey on gaming, and he has interesting results. To you, Paolo.
Thank you very much, Haim. Gaming remains one of the most sought-after genres, generating significant revenue for all stakeholders. More and more users are playing games inside and outside of the home, largely due to smartphones. This has shown far greater appeal beyond the hardcore gamers who typically play with a dedicated games machine or console. Despite this, the move towards streaming games via the internet has been slower compared to some of the other content genres, most notably music and video. Looking at music, clear market leader, Spotify, and the vast majority of music being streamed rather than downloaded. Then, when you look at video, no surprise to see Netflix leading the way, and most of the clips shown and viewed are still being streamed. However, there's still a fair proportion that are being downloaded due to the quality of connections. But in games, the majority of the games are still downloaded. And this represents an opportunity for all players in the value chain. And more importantly, for someone to try to own this streaming revolution, as Spotify has done in music and Netflix in video. Recent developments have shown that this is rapidly changing, with more and more users, especially core gamers, now playing games in the cloud. While the concept of cloud gaming is not new, it has failed to evolve beyond small-scale availability. Fast forward almost a decade, and we've seen a huge shift in technology for the better, changing consumer behavioral patterns and the evolution of business models. Both fixed and mobile networks are getting faster. The arrival of gigabit connectivity paves the way for endless possibilities. Also, users own a slew of the connected devices and are starting to access a wide range of content across them. I've mentioned some of them already, and gaming is the next genre to benefit from this multi-screen usage world. And as you can see on the slide, telcos are starting to get behind cloud gaming, means to cell connection and drive usage over fiber and 5G. Even the consumer electronic providers are finally starting to embrace this emerging opportunity. Sony only recently revealing 2 variants of its next generation console, the PS5, one being digital only with no drive. This telco opportunity was underlined by this latest survey commissioned by ECI Telecom, now part of Ribbon. Made sure I was on message there, which is good. The survey was focused on more than 5,000 ardent gamers that played for at least 3 hours per day prior to the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. The survey was undertaken to better understand the habits and pain points of core gamers when it comes to creating the optimal gaming experience, both indoors and on the move. It also considers attitudes towards cloud gaming, including measuring current appetite for the gaming format, future intentions to play cloud games, both indoors and on the move. And as you can see on the slide, prior to the pandemic, ardent gamers spent more than 3.5 hours per day playing, which increased to nearly 4.5 hours per day across all ages and genders. And the vast majority play at home. It's also interesting to note that ardent gamers use up to 7 different devices. This equates to an average of 3 different devices per user. The gaming console and the smartphone are the most popular. Smartphone is striking amongst this core group, as we know the casual gamer is heavily dependent on games. The ardent gamer spends on average around $84 per month on fixed and mobile broadband connectivity, and the vast majority know whether they receive speeds that they pay for their telcos for. This is unsurprising, given that more than half of gamers pay a premium for a high quality fixed line broadband connection to optimize their gaming experience. 2 key things here: smartphones and the willingness to pay for the best experience. Important elements for cloud gaming to work outside of the home, which Chaim just touched upon. Therefore, the quality of connections is instrumental to creating the perfect gaming experience. Almost 1 in 5 gamers feel some level of disappointment when it comes to the quality of their existing connectivity for gaming. These gamers cited experiencing issues with slow loading times, lag, buffering, failed downloads, and time jumps to a varying degrees. Let's be clear, the concept of cloud gaming is extremely familiar to core gamers. And as you can see on the slide, more than almost 80% of those surveyed regularly play cloud games, and more than half have an active subscription to a cloud gaming service. Of those gamers who haven't yet played cloud games, half expect to do so in the next year. And as per regular games, most cloud games are played indoors. And currently more than 4 in 5 gamers believe that the playing experience of cloud games meets their expectations at least most of the time. However, a fair proportion do feel that improvements can be made to the cloud gaming playing experience. The degradation issues experienced with cloud gaming today are extremely similar to those experienced with other streamed games. Almost all gamers are aware of 5G, and 83% think it will make cloud games more compelling and enjoyable than the experience they offer today. And interestingly enough, a growing number believe they already have 5G today. They have high expectations when it comes to the mobile cloud gaming experience. The majority expect mobile cloud games to be as good as playing a game indoors on Wi-Fi or a fixed line connection. If telcos could guarantee this level of connectivity outside, then as many as 80% of these gamers would play mobile cloud games. Regardless of how satisfied gamers are with their existing levels of connectivity at home and on the move, there is still significant appetite for a better service, and gamers would pay more to receive that better service. Overall, 79% of gamers would consider upgrading their fixed and mobile connections to 5G if it provided a better gaming experience. More than half of these gamers would pay at least 50% more than they currently do today. There is clear revenue potential for telcos beyond just improved connectivity. Almost 3 in 5 of all gamers would switch connectivity provider as soon as they could if a competitor offered a high quality gaming service with a new 5G subscription. It represents an opportunity for telcos to partner with games publishers or the wider cloud gaming ecosystem for bundled offers under a potential revenue share model. Telcos have been keen to forge these relationships with other music and TV providers such as Spotify, Netflix, and many more. The focus for them is on acquiring new subscribers and drive deeper usage. Cloud gaming offers an excellent opportunity for wider collaboration. In closing, yes, there are still challenges that need to be overcome. It remains a nascent market, and convincing users to spend on another subscription will take time. While the biggest opportunity resides with mobile gamers, core gamers represent a key segment which cannot be ignored. They are currently spending a lot of their disposable income on a premium games experience. Content and connectivity have never been as intertwined, as underlined by the need to be more connected as we are today. On that note, thank you very much for your time. Don't forget to submit any questions that you may have. Gabe, back to you.
Thank you, Paolo. Someone in the chat actually has already been asking how much money is there really in cloud gaming. I guess what I picked up from the presentation there is from the operator point of view, a lot of it's in sort of rolled up in the broadband access fee, getting people onto higher tier service and securing loyalty and so forth. Have I got that right?
Yeah, I guess in the immediate term, for most of the telcos today, they're very much keen on driving connections and driving people towards the premium packages. So they're slightly moving towards kind of faster speeds and bigger bundles. So from the immediate opportunity, it's naturally on the access side. But of course, one of the areas that shouldn't be ignored are scope to broaden the revenue stream beyond that. And that's, of course, around the services side. And, these companies that have been active for so long in games, music and video, they, of course, want new audiences. And there's no better reach than what the telcos have. So there's a nice marriage to be made between those guys. And naturally for the operators, beyond just the access, being able to get a tap into the revenue share opportunity of selling those additional subscriptions to their customers.
Yeah, that's a pretty common theme, actually. Telcos of distributors of online products from other people, I guess. On the cloud gaming, you mentioned this. I use the phrase core gamers quite a bit, and I wonder, what do you think? How the core gamers are reacting to the cloud game offers available so far, performance and so forth? Obviously, Haim had those comments that it's not always great. And I think per the survey, you mentioned cloud gaming there in some of the charts. I wonder if do you think they get confused between online and cloud gaming, as the distinction that Haim made as well? Maybe it gets merged in his mind.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Gabe. There's obviously some people maybe fail to make the distinction between the two and often group them into one. We were very specific in the survey, where specifically asking about cloud games. Based on these core gamers, as I say, obviously there's the mass market that needs to be considered as well. But when you look at the core gamers, most have signed up to some form of a cloud game service, and the majority, naturally, as you would expect, are played indoors. And they've experienced some of the issues that Haim talked about, particularly around the lag and the slow loading. Of course, I think Haim eloquently put some of the challenges that need to be faced in trying to make that connection of playing those types of games outside of the home. But more importantly, there is a willingness to play those games outside of the home because people are connected with the number of devices that they have, but also equally as well, they're willing to pay for that premium experience on the go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Paolo. Hi, just to bring you in a little bit here. Basically, if I'm tell me if I'm right in thinking, if you can kind of, as an operator, solve the cloud gaming experience or make it, so good that people will shift, that core gamers will shift from consoles, does that really mean you can handle pretty much any application?
Yes, Gabe, this is correct. Cloud gaming is basically taking the best features of all 5G profiles. You have high bandwidth, you have low latency, high reliability, and with coupling that all together, if you can deliver 5G gaming with all of these capabilities, you basically can deliver any type of service. So upgrading to cloud gaming and being able to deliver cloud gaming means that you can deliver any type of the 5G profile services. I would also like to mention, you asked about the revenues from cloud gaming. Like in the CDN world that is used for Netflix and so on, carriers are also going to make money from hosting the cloud servers, the cloud game servers in their mix. So it's not only about selling more bandwidth, it's also revenue sharing and hosting revenues coming from the cloud providers.
Yeah, okay. I was going to ask you actually. We've had a couple questions on this anyway, so maybe get it in now. What do you think about the relationship then between the telco and their edge cloud and edge connectivity strategies, and the relationship with the people who have the games, particularly Google and Microsoft are obviously delivering over their own platforms. Most other games companies are running on AWS. What do you make of that relationship in terms of developing an edge strategy and the need to, do you see, what I see mostly is Google and AWS putting servers in the operator facility in the perimeter?
Yeah, but it's you pay for the hosting and placing your server at the telco premises does cost money. and by the way, a lot of money, and some carriers are making a lot of money out of CDNs for Netflix and the like. The second thing is that you really, if it's all about latency and game experience, you get from the carriers not only hosting, but also hard slicing services. And you get also game analytics in terms of traffic analytics. So you can improve your game statistics, maybe according to the traffic analytics, you decide to change the locations of the game servers, putting more in one location, maybe dismantling another location. So it's not just about giving them a place in the rack and electricity. It's much more than that.
And just again, what do you mean by hard slicing services there?
So as I mentioned in my presentation, if you place your game server, you still need to have connectivity to your console. And for that, you need to have a hard slice from the game server to the user. And so while the carrier are promoting this hard slicing, basically they will, as in other cases, they will split the cost between the user and the provider. So both of them are going to pay for the hard slicing, and this is why I think it's also going to be on an on-demand type of service and not always on type of service, because it's going to be expensive.
Okay, understood. Okay, toward the exercise. Thanks, Haim. We'll come back to you in the Q&A in a moment.
Okay.
For the final section, I'm just going to hand over to David Stokes at ECI, now part of Ribbon. David.
Thank you very much, Gabe, and a really insightful presentation from Paolo. I must say, however, as a father of 12-year-old twins who have a 3/4 bus trip to and from school, I am particularly concerned about the impact of cloud gaming on my wallet. Yes, it's really, really quite an exciting thing. And I really do see from their behaviours that this is something where there will be money and people wanting to take it. But to do this, it's not just about the 5G radio network. The transport network really has to be evolved. And it's pretty mandatory that the transport network evolved in the right way to address these issues of lag, slow loading that we have mentioned, to gain these new revenue generating services. But it's not just lag and slow loading that gamers and others in these new services are looking for. There's other factors like reliability, synchronization, and security. And these are going to start to come into play in the very near future. So currently, as Gabe mentioned, mobile network operators are currently deploying 5G. This is mainly being deployed in non-standalone mode. But as they start to move to mass rollout of eMBB, mobile broadband services, they're going to need to move to standalone mode. And as they do that, they're going to need to deploy more transport infrastructure to provide the capacity and the connectivity for this mass rollout. And as they move past best effort eMBB, they're going to need to improve the intelligence of this transport network to provide, as I mentioned, the advanced sync, the slicing, the programmability for the new services. So just to touch on some of those very briefly, everybody knows and has heard that the capacity required in 5G and the uplift required is huge. As you can see from the figures on this chart, we're talking about an order of magnitude uplift across the whole of the transport network, both in terms of the switching capabilities and the interfaces. 25 gigabit Ethernet interfaces from new radio. But that really misses the story. As Haim mentioned, the capacity needs to be allocated where and when you require it. So you might decide to put a mobile edge compute with your gaming server at the edge of the network, or you might move it further into the network, or you might need to instantiate more examples of those gaming servers. So it's not just capacity, it's the ability to deploy capacity in a very dynamic way. And that's a massive change from 4G. It's no longer a static network, it's dynamic and high capacity. big change. The transport network isn't used to doing this. This is something new for everyone. But it's not just about capacity. The services that will be supported by 5G themselves have extremely diverse policies and parameters. Even those services that Hein mentioned at the start of the presentation, they're services that we see being deployed in the near term. For example, best effort mobile broadband might require the ultra-high capacity, but there are not really any strict demands on latency or reliability. Whereas, as we have heard, gaming needs low latency, and this low latency will need to be guaranteed, and it will need to be extremely reliable if gamers are going to pay extra money to use it. And then let's take a third example, which is in the near future, smart cities or smart infrastructure will require a vast number of sensors and actuators. Each of these sensors has relatively low bandwidth needs, but there's going to be thousands of them, and you've got to provide connectivity to those. And if the data or the systems they provide data to are mission critical, like traffic management systems, the connectivity will need to be highly reliable and provide data so that systems can react in near real time. So you can see here, you're talking about high reliability, low latency, but not as low as gaming, but not high capacity. And you can see already, you can see three massively diverse needs here. It really is not cost effective to build a single homogeneous network to support these services. Hence, we have the concept of network slicing. And in this approach, network functions, whether they be virtual or physical, are assigned to a given slice and allocated in a way that meets the policies and parameters of the services that are supported on each slice. And this is what we in Ribbon call service imposed network slicing. These slices, and you can see that on the right-hand side here, these slices are created to meet the latency, capacity, reliability demands of a given service, and to ensure that the services on one slice cannot impact the behavior of services on another slice. Slicing also uses technology that isolates one slice from another. The level of isolation required between the slices depends on the services being transported. So, for example, best effort services will not need the same level of isolation and protection as the mission critical services. And the mission critical services will need to run on a slice which has higher isolation from all other slices. What do I mean by that? So basically, if you're using the same packet buffer, there's always a risk that you can overload the packet buffer in one given slice. So you need to isolate between different packet buffers if you're using packet buffers, that is. So there are going to be different techniques to achieve this slicing approach. Gaming, for example, I would say has been in the middle, somewhere between best effort mobile broadband and mission critical services. You're going to need a degree of isolation, but not the level you're going to need in mission critical services, but you certainly need more than you're going to do in best effort. So as you can see here, we're going to need a number of different slicing approaches, each offering different levels of isolation. And then if we go into a little bit further in the future, you could even see wholesalers leasing slices to MNOs, and that you'll definitely need to isolate that slice from other slices being offered to other MNOs. So that's sort of the service imposed slicing, but having accepted that slicing makes sense for services, it's a very logical step to use it to isolate networks from each other in what we call network imposed network slicing. And you can either, an MNO can share the transport network using hard slicing to provide hard isolation between the transport network that they are providing themselves and to another MNO, or very similar, wholesalers can offer transport networks to multiple MNOs, providing hard slicing and hard operational slicing between each MNO. And then we start to move on to having a homogeneous pool of resources. If you use network imposed slicing, you can see a single transport network which is able to provide the transport for all your mobile access, but also all of your fixed access services. You end up with a fixed and mobile converged transport network able to support all different forms of transports required in the network with a slice allocated per service type, whether it be fixed or whether it be access. And this is a really good step on the way to true fixed mobile convergence. Now, within this sliced approach, that doesn't really answer everything. There is also need to have a much more accurate latency and synchronization. So, for example, Class C or D compliant synchronization is required. First, it's required to make 5G itself work when you're running mass MIMO type deployments, but there's a lot of location-based services which require this synchronization. And by the way, the synchronization solution is a hardware solution. It's something you can't retrofit. So you really, when you start upgrading the transport network, you really need to put it in day one. That's just an aside. And then we move on to the low latency discussion we mentioned earlier. So as I mentioned, you can put dynamic bandwidth allocation to the MEX and put the MEX closer to the edge. That really reduces latency. You can then make sure you use a transport network that's low latency, so either high-speed optical express path or low latency packet transport technologies like FLEXi. So I'll take an example here, and this example is, in this example I'm talking a cable co or an MSO, but it could equally be any transport network operators wholesaling services. With the next generation of transport devices, they're higher density, higher capacity with longer reach. This means fiber can go deeper into the network. That in turn frees up space in the equipment rooms they currently use. These users could either give the space back to the people they're leasing it from, or more probably intelligently, if they want to make more money, that space could be used to house the virtual machines and the infrastructure required for mobile edge compute or other local compute. So in wholesaling the backhaul type network of 5G, they could also wholesale edge data centers with all the resources that an MNO would need to then download the VNFs that they want onto that edge compute. And so if you're talking about gaming services, this is really very exciting, because not only are they offering low latency connectivity, they can also offer those edge data centers to house the gaming servers. A really, I think, quite a compelling value proposition, and one we'll see much more of as we move forwards. So what are the technologies that make this real? Well, firstly, I think most people have heard about segment routing. This is a logical extension of the deterministic packet technologies that you're being used today. So either IP-MPLS with RSVPTE or MPLS-TP. Segment routing takes the best bits of each of these technologies and provides a dynamic way of allocating deterministic services that we require in these new advanced services. So it uses centralized control, giving you guarantees on performance, etc. So segment routing is a key technology here. FLEXi takes low latency and determinism to another level. And also isolation. It does this by mapping the traffic into defined time slots. So you eliminate the packet buffers. So you don't have that problem with potentially one packet stream interfering with another through overload. You remove that problem by mapping it into time slots. You can guarantee the latency, which is extremely low, and you can guarantee the isolation. Another important technology on the route to hard isolation. Then you've got to monitor the network and make sure you have data in real time about how it's performing if you're going to guarantee performance. And there's a technology called IP-TWAMP, which has been introduced to provide real-time pushed performance and fault information from the network up to the orchestrator and domain controllers. And finally, I already mentioned, you've got to have hardware-enabled Class C and Class D timing to make even the basic mass MIMO type functionality work, let alone location-based services. So you really need to be looking for these sort of technologies in the network when you're looking for high isolation and low latency. So what makes the transport solution...
David, we have 10 minutes left.
Yeah. So I'm just coming to the end, actually. So what makes the transport solutions so special? As I've mentioned, the ability to provide dynamic capacity for these dynamic low latency services. That capacity has to be using deterministic connectivity where required. You've got to be able to enable functionality when and when you want it, with programmable slicing, allowing you to choose the level of slicing you want and the level of isolation. Clearly, end-to-end, you've got to have security across your network, ever important. And the 5G network, there's no one single vendor or even one single operator going to offer the end-to-end story. The 5G network inherently has to be open and interoperable. So I hope you've seen that the transport network now takes a pivotal role in 5G and is fundamental in allowing mobile network operators to gain access to early revenue generating services. And today, we at Ribbon have the right solution at the right time with the right features to allow MNOs to start driving extra revenue from 5G. And if you're interested about our solutions, look out for more from us over the next few months, where we're going to be introducing more information about the solutions we have and how we can enable this revenue generation for the 5G mobile network operators. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll open it up to Q&A.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks, David. So we do have a ton of questions. I guess a quick one for you to start. You mentioned right at the beginning of your section there, 25 gig E to the site. Are you seeing that going in as a sort of a standard capacity these days? I mean,
it's part of the standards definition. At the moment, that people aren't using that sort of capacity, but then at the moment, people aren't mass rolling out 5G either. So I think we'll see those capacities in particular geographies being very common. I think the key within the 5G environment is flexibility and the ability to move with the demands as they change. Certainly in an environment where you see one macro base station acting to aggregate data from other smaller base stations, 25 gig E will definitely occur, and occur quite quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. That makes sense. On the generic area of network slicing, I go to you first, David, and then Haim. In terms of your sort of, I guess we kind of get the theory, and you went through the various types of slicing. In terms of your sort of day-to-day business, how progressed do you think the industry, and I guess by that I mean your customers in general, are in terms of designing and implementing a slicing capable network? I
think the vendor side is very well advanced, with different vendors having different approaches. Some vendors believing that you can do everything from a soft sliced approach and under utilizing the network resources. By soft slicing here, I mean things like EVPN, segment routing being used for soft slicing, dedicated queues, etc. Other vendors believing that you actually, to get the higher isolation, you need to add in capabilities like OTN. And from the operator side, I think because the specification hasn't been standardized yet, they're still playing around with it in sandboxes and really understanding the limitations and the advantages. And I also think they're starting to see the benefits outside of the mobile space. I mean, certainly when we talk to my other area of interest, mission critical networks, people who own those, they're really excited about sliced networks because you can split your IT technology from your OT technology. They're very excited about what they can do. I think it's getting there, but it's going to accelerate very quickly as people move away from management focused just on 5G initial rollout.
Yeah, okay, good stuff. Haim, David, your colleague, expertly positioned that vendors such as Ribbon, ECI are very well positioned here. How are you sort of reading the telco and the operator progress?
So it's a good question, and what's interesting is the way hard slicing and network slicing in general is played into mobile networks. Now, there are two things that come to play. There is a tendency from carriers, regardless of services, to deploy a C-RAN, Cloud RAN, which requires hard slicing just to deliver the middle and frontal traffic into the CU, the central locations. So they need to invest in hard slicing just for that. Now, once they have this hard sliced technology, they can think what they can do with that with more features on the service side. So I think while the services side is still not clear to them, to some of them, they have the hard slicing anyway. And what we're encouraging them is to look with other opportunities they have with hard slicing other than just servicing the frontal networks.
So that's interesting. So essentially the RAN architecture and the RAN development is going to require hard slicing, and so therefore from then you can start introducing service slicing. Quick question for you right at the start, Kemin, about your autonomous vehicles and your APIs there. The question was, how will carriers get access to the data mentioned that is owned by the car manufacturer today?
So the idea is that every car has a SIM, and the location of the SIM and the information about the SIM is registered automatically in the network. So the information about the car, its whereabouts, where it's going and everything, it's already there in the SIM itself. So this is how they get information. They don't need to be connected to the car manufacturer's requirements.
Okay. There's several fairly detailed questions coming in for David on some of his slicing slides. I don't think we're going to manage to get to them right now. But hopefully David can talk with you offline. Let's tell us, David. Let's do this one because I think it's a good question from an operator out in Asia, I think. The question is, in your slide, scalable capacity, you mentioned NE capacity increase from access towards core interface. In 5G, we moved the data center towards aggregation and access. Why do we require big capacity at the core, i.e. 400 gig, as you mentioned?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
I think the gist of the question is, if we're moving data centers and cloud out into the aggregation and access network, why do we need to invest so much in high capacity in the core, i.e. the 400 gig you mentioned?
Oh, right, yeah, very, very good question. It can't all, unfortunately, we can't put everything in the data center. We are talking such a big increase in capacity in the network that you need to do stuff, process wherever you can to reduce that capacity in the core. So you're going to see edge data centers, regional data centers, and centralized data centers. It's just the nature that the capacity is growing that much, and certain stuff doesn't make sense to go back and be processed at the edge. I'll take a very quick example of that. If you actually believe in the story around remote surgery, that can only work with raw video. You can't. There's been studies done at King's University about this. You cannot do it by compressed video, not detailed surgery, and that needs to go. You can process what you like locally. Ultimately, that huge HD video capacity needs to go right to the core. You can't odds it. So there's things like that. You're going to have huge capacity.
Okay, let's move on. We've got time for one last question, I think. And Haim, I'm going to send this to you. It's a CTO-style question. And we actually have several around this theme. I'm just going to read this one out and see how you take it. how will dynamic end-to-end network slicing be enabled in the 5G network across transport network, RAN, and core network? Is there a single entity that will enable and control this? I don't have a ton of time, but do you want to just have put a bit of color on that?
Yeah, so in short, there is not going to be just a single entity. There is going to be a federation of that. The MEF is working on that, and the only way to do it is by federation and machine-to-machine communication. That means between different administrative domains.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. And very succinct, thank you. So that brings us to the top of the hour. We're going to have to close the call. Thanks everybody for your questions. There's tons we didn't get to. Lots of you asked about Wi-Fi. That's maybe for another day. With that, though, I'd just like to thank our three panelists. David Stokes from ECI. Thank you, David.
Thank you, and we'll get back to you with the questions.
Sure, thank you. Paolo Pescatore from PP Foresight. Thanks, Paolo.
Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Hope it was all useful.
And Haim Porat as well from Ribbon ECI. Thank you, Haim.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. So with that, we're going to close the webinar, push the audience evaluation form to your screen. If you can take a second to fill it in before you go, it'd be greatly appreciated. But in the meantime, thank you and goodbye.